The fats are the great lubricators of the body. Another one is lecithin. You know, Jeffrey used to recommend lecithin a lot. You know, lecithin helps us with cholesterol. It's the same thing with cholesterol. We need the cholesterol naturally exists in the body, and so we need those natural forms of it. And so for a lot of people, you know, if you do participate in a little bit of meat, you can do the salmons, the sardines. If you don't, then you have to really pay attention to the nuts and the seeds, which is another form of those healthy fats. But many times when women have interruptions to their female cycles, that is going to be the essential fatty acids. Can also be the minerals. You know, calcium is extremely necessary. And I'm beginning to think that vitamin D might show up in that area as well. The research coming out on vitamin D is pretty exciting these days. All right, and so again, back to this whole fertility thing. Pretty clear on what it is. And so you can draw up the monthly charts when the female is having the conception issues, or when you have females who are trying to practice natural birth control.
I'm just curious, what was the doctor? It was a doctor, right, that discovered that whole
Yes,
thing?
Dr. Eugene Jonas, E-U-G-E-N.
That put the moon cycle with the biological.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So, have you ever heard about any astrological correlations for men being more fertile?
No.
No.
I've not heard about it with men. No. But in my own research, because I have a family, a sister, who her and her husband are having conception issues. So we've been working on this one. And a lot of what I have been discovering is the EFAs make just as big of a difference to the men as the women. The essential fatty acids are very necessary to healthy egg and healthy sperm.
It seems to me, that, and I've read a little bit about this, but that Saturn and or Jupiter going through the 5th house would be a really key transit time when that would
Saturn
be
through the 5th house could decrease the fertility. Jupiter through the 5th house could increase fertility. And that's true for not only men, also women. It's true for both.
Couldn't Saturn bring? Because if you're thinking
It
of
could-
hard work
yes,
and
it's
like
not- yeah.
responsibility, then
It's not an absolute.
Okay.
It's not. What it will start to get into is what are the signs on the cusp of the 5th house. If they are water and earth, they're known as more fertile signs. If they are fire and air, they are known as more barren signs. Okay?
yeah, this is what I was wondering.
But it's not an absolute.
Okay.
Again, nothing is an absolute.
It would seem like any triggers to the 5th would be, those would be the peak times in general
Yep.
during those months for either
Yep.
male or female.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And you could also start to look at Saturn, Venus in the woman's chart, Saturn, Mars in the man's chart. You can start to work with that stuff. And so we can work with those examples when we move into charts, definitely. Yeah, because what's also happened is it's just a byproduct of our westernized diets and lifestyles. When we have all of these processed foods in which all of the phytonutrients have been taken out of what's naturally there in more natural foods and raw foods, it's really upsetting the hormonal balance. I mean, I'm not going to know the statistics, but the Western men's have, I think, something like half of the sperm that they used to have compared to 50 years ago. And what's happening in the case of my situation with my brother-in-law is they're going through some testing because my sister can conceive, but she miscarries. They can't hold the fertilized egg. And they've got fragmented DNA. And they wanted my sister and brother-in-law, what you call it? I'm just interviewed them about possibly doing being in a study, a scientific study, and the study was going to be on EFAs, and because my brother-in-law was already taking them, they disqualified them for the study. So there it tells you where the research, is trying to look and investigate and see. And so what they've been learning so far with their allopathic doctors, although they're really opening up more and more to nutrition, is it's not just the EFAs, it's for the man, it's also silica and zinc. And silica and zinc are very necessary for a healthy prostate, and therefore the prostate creates the seminal fluid that the sperm lives in. And so again, EFAs, and silica is ruled by Jupiter, and so is zinc. All right, so I just wanted to touch on that whole subject of fertility. Any other questions? Anything else that's popping up for male or female in regards to that? My point was to share with you, it's such a simple concept to look at the whole sun-moon return charts that happen 13 months a year, because it'll be a lunar thing, and to use it with birth control or fertility. Another area that I just wanted to speak to generally before we move into specifics of nutrition, and that is the whole concept of surgery with astrology. It is one of my least favorite things to do as an astrologer, and I tend to, with the general public, price myself out of the market. I have a small circle of friends who have known me for years. Kim, please tell me when to go have surgery, be it elective or be it something that is health related. I've got to figure out, let me tell you where this is going to be in your books. I don't know if I put it in here. I'll have to research it, or if somebody finds it. I'm not remembering quite where I put it in your books. So, oh, yes, I do. It's back in Charts and Miscellaneous, and it's actually, I think, one of the last half a dozen pages. You can go back there. Again, I have to give credit to, I did not get this typed in, so I will give you this, but you will see one book, the American Book of Nutrition and Medical Astrology. This is a book by a woman called, it's a page out of a book by a woman called Eileen Naumann. The book was published in 1982. If you want to know this book, if you're interested in this book, I don't agree. Again, I've never found a book I agree with 100% of the time. Maybe Jeffrey's Pluto books might be an exception. But this book by Eileen Naumann, N-A-U-M-A-N, was published by Astro Computing Services in 1982. I don't know if it's published anymore, but she did put a little succinct thing about surgery. If you ever try to do this, it is just a big left brain nightmare, because you're never going to find an elective surgery date that's 100%. And so you always just have to weigh the positive versus the negative aspects, or what we would say the ease aspects with the stressful aspects. Ease being trines and sextiles, stressful being conjunctions, squares, oppositions, and inconjuncts. You're just going to have to weigh them. So if you are ever having to look at surgery for yourself, simplify it down. You always want to have surgery either just before or after new moon. You want to avoid surgery during full moon. And so that right there gives you 2 weeks out of the month to have surgery, the week before or after the new moon. The reason for this is there will be less bleeding on a new moon than a full moon. And if nothing else, if you can just follow that one rule, you can save yourself a lot of effort. Another simple one that you want to look for is avoiding a moon voidicourse. And again, once the moon makes the last aspect it's going to make to any other planet before changing signs, that's how you define voidicourse. You know, the moon goes around the zodiac every 27.5 days. It spends approximately 2.5 days in a sign. When it makes the last aspect it's going to make, last major aspect to another planet, then it's void of course until it ingresses into the next sign. And it's a general rule of thumb to avoid surgery when the moon is void of course. And basically, the rule of thumb for this is it's avoiding complications in surgery. Okay? Another simple one is you do not want surgery when the moon is in the sign of the body part receiving surgery. Okay? So let's just use simple examples. The moon itself rules containers of the body. So if you need to have gallbladder surgery, you need to have stomach surgery, you don't want to have surgery when the moon's in Cancer. Okay? And you can get real complicated with this one. And so whenever it gets too complicated, you go back to the simple directions. Another simple rule of thumb is, again, having surgery when the moon is in a fire or air sign, because there's less bleeding. There's more bleeding when the moon is in a water or earth sign. Make sense?
Which was the right one? Or the good one?
When the moon is in fire or air, less bleeding. Okay? Another one, is, another simple one, is avoiding surgery during Mercury retrograde and Mars retrograde. Mercury retrograde, you understand the details, the mix-ups. They get the right leg instead of the left leg, and you wanted surgery on the left leg. You've read about that in the newspapers. And the other thing is Mars rules surgery. And so when Mars is retrograde for 2.5 months, once every 2 years, it would be a general time period to avoid it. Now, I have known people who've had surgery during Mercury retrograde, my mother being one of them, having surgery. She had a hysterectomy. She had it when the moon was in Scorpio. She has moon in Scorpio. My mom sailed through fine without a single complication. But my mom is first stage spirituated, and when she makes her mind up spiritually, it goes as she says. So there's the spiritual body stronger than the physical body. Now I've also had another friend, also has, no, he's a Gemini moon. I have another friend, and a good friend of mine, and you know who I'm speaking about, went in to have a simple little knee surgery procedure, some minor little outpatient thing. Ended up out of work for 6 weeks. And we just happened to have had a phone call in our connecting. This happened several years ago. And he said he had surgery, and It was Mercury retrograde and Mars retrograde. He still jokes about it. He says, I'm not ever going to have surgery again unless I call you. It's one of those friends in which I'm like, okay, here, you know. So most of the time when, as an astrologer, because it can get extremely complicated, I usually try to give people these simple rules. The week before or after a new moon, the moon in a fire or air sign, and if they know astrology, I tell them to try and avoid the body part ruled by the moon. And then you've simplified it as much as possible, and chances are most of the surgeries will go okay. And I just gave you an example of both extremes. So, questions on that? With any of that? Simple? Makes sense? Again, you can take it into more complications. You want to have nice, easy trines and sextiles with the moon or the body or the planet that rules the body part you're getting surgery on. You want to avoid the stressful aspects. You start working with that, it can get real complicated with that. So you just simplify it down to try and do it during new moon time if you can. All right? Anything else? Any questions? Anything on that? In regards to that? If you want to go to the section of your manual on exercise and rest, I would like each of you to use this. You don't have to do it now, but between today and tomorrow's class, I want you to do this exercise for yourself. And that is the Harris-Benedict formula for how many calories a day you need. Because I want you to surprise yourselves. And I want you to then gain a concept of just how much exercise we need as humans. Because our daily caloric need to not only survive, but to, you know, I read something over this summer. The only scientifically proven method for longevity is calorie reduction. And so you've heard about the, I'm not going to remember what the little catchphrase is for it, but it's something in regards to the fact that you're slightly starving yourself, and those who go around just slightly hungry all the time live longer. Scientifically proven. I know. I know. Darn. So I counteract that with lots of exercise. But this is a very standard formula to find out what your basic metabolic rate is at rest, which means what it takes to have the heart and the liver and all your organs functioning on a daily basis. The rule of thumb is, and again, I'm going to have to refer to one of my other notes here, and let me see if I can find it for us. I'm going to go off the top of my head from what I've read. The daily rule of thumb is about, I think it was 60 to 80% of our calories are needed for the body to just function with all its organs and everything. I'll have to find that little tidbit for you. I don't have the specific things. And then there was another 10% needed for something else. It was a very small amount that's actually needed for physical activity. You got to burn a lot of calories to actually burn calories. I mean, you got to do a lot of exercising to actually burn calories. It's not that much. You can see by this formula that for women, active lifestyle, it's only another 300 calories a day. Now, this is an average active lifestyle. This is not somebody who bikes, 20 miles a day or runs marathons. Obviously, you can tell how many, that's a lot, they start to burn a lot of calories. But we really don't need as much calories as we think we do. And again, you'll see down at the bottom of this, I just stuck in a little tidbits for you. A cup is the size of your fist. 3 ounces of meat is a deck of cards. and 2 tablespoons is the size of a golf ball. And so those are some of the average portions we need when we have various foods. So when we come back after lunch, we'll see that the cup is referring to fruits and vegetables. We'll see that the ounces is meat, if you eat meat, and we'll see that the tablespoons are those things like, the sugars and all the dense caloric items we love to eat. So I want all of you to, tonight, back in your room, little pen and paper, you're going to test your math if you don't have a calculator. I want you to figure out what your average daily caloric need is. Okay? So you just just a little consciousness awakening for ourselves with that. Any questions on that? This is a pretty standardized formula that is used in the dietary nutrition world in figuring out calories. And by the way, the examples in here are Leroy and Kim Marie. And Leroy remembers when the morning I figured this out, I was just pissed. 1,500? I'm going, that's all I can have? Because I've went through those phases of counting calories. I don't do it anymore. Now I just go through the cardiovascular activity. And I'm real big on cardiovascular activity as being digestive enzymes is a biggie for me. Cleansing the colon is a biggie for me. Exercise is a biggie for me. Do the Harris-Benedict formula on yourself and then adjust it if you think that you are an active or very active person to figure out what your daily caloric need is. And again, I put exercise down to, well, actually, in addition to Mars, which rules muscles, which overall rules energy, I also kind of relate the whole exercise area to not only Saturn, but Jupiter as well. What you'll find in astrology is Jupiter and Saturn co-rule a lot together because Jupiter overall is growth and Saturn overall is decay. But Jupiter is also excess and Saturn is the whole discipline. And so, this is just a broad concept. We're not into some of the specifics, but the whole concept of exercise for me is also something that is extremely important in our westernized lifestyles because we are not active like our hereditary ancestry is. We do not come from a genetics that sits. We come from a genetics that was always busy walking in some way. And CSPI, which we spoke about this morning, I just want to share a couple of little things about CSPI, and hopefully I'm going to find this one for you. In regards to the fact that there's studies that are coming out now that if you are willing to just walk places, in other words, we can burn a lot of calories, a lot more calories than we think we can, not by being like the marathon runner or necessarily the weightlifter, but just having a little more active lifestyle. And there's a new concept coming out of Mayo Clinic, actually, believe it or not. An endocrinologist named James Levine. He talks about the concept of NEAT, N-E-A-T. And NEAT, it stands for non-exercise activity thermogenesis. Non-exercise activity thermogenesis. And that just means that, in a nutshell, if you can do your activities on your feet instead of sitting. And so they're starting to do studies in, you don't have a handout to this, okay? Sorry about that. I didn't think it was worth the handout to, I had to kind of prioritize how many pages I'd print. But basically, the host system is they're starting to do studies where in big major metropolitan offices, they are making cubicles without chairs, and around the outside of the floor is a walking track. And so they walk and talk when they have meetings. And they're showing a tremendous, amount of ability to burn calories, stay healthy. And so to extrapolate from that, it's parking at the far end of the parking lot and walking into the building. It's finding all the little ways that you can be active, going up and down a flight of stairs, doing simple little things like that. The ability to burn calories does not mean you have to go to the gym every day. It's just simply standing on your feet more. And that's something that we all can get acclimated to, and just really activating the body. And they're talking about, for people who have never done any exercising, simple little things like this can start to make a big difference in calories because the heart, the cardio area, is been so atrophied, that's the word, atrophied, that it doesn't take much to get yourself active again. And so we all know the thing that we need to get up off the chair and take a walk around the block when we are, God, I'm getting into words I can't pronounce. Sedentary? Sedentary, yeah. And so, I don't know, I guess with 5 planets in the 9th house, which is the outdoors, I've always been a hiker. Give me a mountain and I want to climb it. And so I've not been one that's had to work with exercise much. If I don't get, I go 2-3 days without exercise and you really don't want to be around me because I'm craving it. And so I'm probably the opposite extreme in some ways. But my whole point is the most important thing you can do, one of those things again, for the whole entire body is a cardiovascular workout. And it doesn't have to be the treadmill. It doesn't have to be running 10 miles. It is a lot easier than what we think it is. Now, I said this earlier. I'm going to repeat it again because it's important. When you know that you have been getting adequate rest and you're feeling tired, that is the sign that you need to exercise. And any of you who have ever done that, where you've been tired, and you've been able to get yourself up off the couch or out of the chair, and you actually go out and take a walk, and you feel better afterwards, you know that difference. That's what the tiredness is telling you. And what's happened in our modern world is, oh, I'm tired, I need to take a nap. So we lay down and take a nap again, and we do what's not the healthiest for us. There's been study after study that has shown when you can get people to slowly increase the amount of physical activity they get, everything improves. All body systems, from the cardiovascular to the nervous system, to the digestive system, the elimination system, because I don't pronounce that word good, all of them, they all improve with this. And so, as I was saying earlier, no substitutes for diet, exercise, and rest. And we are raising a generation of children that are not exercising. And so we are seeing all of these diseases that used to be senior citizen diseases, the old diseases. They're showing up younger and younger and younger. Now there's multiple reasons for that, but one of those reasons is the lack of exercise combined with these modern diets in our westernized world.
Well, and also we had a cancer sun, the U.S., just to say. I also think the sedentary aspect of the U.S. culture is we have a cancer sun. Cancer likes to sit down and hang out.
Yes.
That's a cultural.
It is a cultural thing.
Yeah.
We also have, as a culture, an Aquarius moon. And so it depends. We can we have a
Get
tendency to
active.
be a stressful culture. And we need, again, just some of that whole basics of exercise. And um, here's another little tidbit for you. People don't realize that 150 years ago, which is a speck of time in human consciousness, 90% of the world's population were agriculturalists. In other words, we had to grow and raise the food before we could eat it. And so we've had such massive changes in such a short period of time. And so this is something that, as we start moving more and more into charts as we go through the rest of this week, one of the things is going to be looking at various ways in the chart that people could have activities. You've got all of what I call the slower activities like meditation and Tai Chi and yoga that will have all of their benefits to the nervous system, which will help benefit the endocrine system, as we see how interrelated these two are as we go by. But then you have all of the fast activity things. I cannot stress this enough. And people call me up, as I've done health and wellness readings over the years, and even more and more so, and they want all the benefits without any of the work, and I don't know of any substitute. I've heard that there is a pill coming out that is finally able to, in mice, get the same results of a heavy-duty workout from a pill.
Oh, okay.
We're probably 5-10 years away yet before that can be in human form, and I don't know if I even would agree with that in human form.
We'll do it. And in human form, it's probably going to be several gallons of something instead of a little pill.
Exactly. And so they call it the neat beat. So the neat beat is the non-exercise activity that burns calories, okay? Shopping, walking, other movement, just basically getting off your feet and learning how to do it outside of a chair. So again, they're doing these tests in these major areas where these people who sit all day and work at computers are doing it standing. And they're finding that once they adjust to that within a month, people love it. And they're doing these walk and talk meetings. People are loving it because any of you who've ever had that 8 to 5 job where you're confined to that 4x4 cubicle, you think you're going to go crazy. It's not our nature. And so I'll get off my little soapbox for that. I said I wasn't going to preach, and here I am. Another thing that comes into that whole area of exercise, and this one to me also is very Mars related, and I think this is in your handout because I thought this was some nice generic stuff. After your calorie things, you're going to see there's 2 CSPI articles. One is Saving Muscles, which is about weightlifting. And the other one is Breaking Up, which is basically about osteoporosis. I will again let you kind of look at these articles on your own, and I'll just hit some basics on this. By the time we get to our early 20s, we have gained our muscle mass on our own that we're going to do. After that, it's up to us to use it or lose it. So by the time you get to your mid-20s, you need to be using it or losing it. Now, one of the nicest things about weightlifting, and this is again where I like CSPI, they're very middle of the road. They're not messel in a bottle. We didn't take those 2 pages out because the rest of the article was in there. But you will look at this and you will see that they give you some exercises that you can do before you don't even have to go to the gym. The benefits of weightlifting have just been proven again and again and again. It helps us increase our metabolism. It helps us decrease muscle marbling, which is the fat that goes in between the muscles, okay? It helps us strengthen bones, and it helps us retain balance. What was the statistic? By the time we are 80 years old, I think 60% of us have a fall or something like that. It's a very strong leading cause of death. And again, this is not in your stuff. I'll just find my statistic here for you. About 1 in 3 people over age 70 will fall each year. And this is one of the major causes, in addition to disease, of older people dying. They break their hip, they break their bones, and they never become mobile again. And it is so simple and so easy to regain. There's so many things that once we reach, a certain age, it's hard to get back. Increasing your muscle strength and therefore your ability to be mobile, your ability to not fall, it is something that is very, very simple to do. And it doesn't take a lot. I've included some exercise in here. Those of you who then want to go to the gym, it's a very empowering thing. And again, so lifting weights is going to be Mars muscles and Saturn bones. Okay? And so just a way to look at this, if you are someone who has stressful aspects to Mars in your chart, you can build up lactic acid or inflammation. Specific remedy for that is vitamin B5 pantothenic acid. But a natural remedy to that is use it or lose it, exercising the muscles. Now, go ahead. I'll make my note.
Just wondering if, so aspects between Mars and Saturn are going to relate somewhat to exercise and its connection with the bones, specifically things like weightlifting or something?
Yeah, it can very easily, yeah. A stressful aspect between Mars and Saturn, you can be susceptible to weaker bones that you need to strengthen.
Yes. Okay, because I have a 9-degree conjunction. Mars at 15 and Saturn at 24 Leo. So I'm just wondering about that. Like
I didn't hear the Mars.
15 Leo and 24 for Saturn.
So they're a conjunction?
Yeah.
That would be a similar thing. It would be stress. Understand that in health and wellness astrology, the stressful aspects can be an indicator of more susceptibility to the imbalance, to a weaker link to the imbalance. Whereas trines and sextiles can show strength between those two archetypes when it comes to health and wellness. So a conjunction is considered one of the stressful aspects. So yes, there can be the need to be able to do that. And in the case with yours, the conjunction in Leo, the sun rules the heart, the sun's related to Leo. When you exercise, you strengthen your heart. Mars, Saturn conjunction in Leo. So you not only strengthen the muscles, you strengthen heart muscles specifically.
And that would be even more emphasized with my Saturn square my Sun.
Totally.
Okay.
Totally.
Okay. And then if you want to look historically, my grandfather had multiple, I think he had four heart surgeries in his life. If you think lineage, Saturn.
Yep, there's the genetics.
Saturn's in the 4th too, so.
When we get into some actual chart practice later in this week, one of the things that I do is I will go through an environmental questioning, I'll go through questioning the client with the environmental conditioning. And I'll go through patriarchal and matriarchal lineage. Because if you see it in the lineage genetically, then that will also be one of those conditionings that will add to indicators in the chart. Yep, definitely. And so, again, with Mars, with just the exercising, with just strength training, with just use it or lose it. If you think back to our natural lifestyles in natural law, we were very active people. I mean, how many millennia did we survive fight or flight? It hasn't been that long ago that, we didn't worry about the bear in the woods getting us. But another thing I wanted to say about the weightlifting, if you decide that you can go beyond these exercises here and somebody wants to get into actually going to a gym, there's a concept that I discovered a couple of years ago, and I've lifted weights for probably about 15 years. And believe me, you got to do a lot of work to be a muscle mass. It's hard for me to even do it that much. So you don't have to overwhelm. I have a little 13-year-old niece who's afraid of going to the gym and lifting weights because she's afraid of looking like a guy. And I'm like, honey, if you knew how hard you had to work. But the concept that I discovered a couple of years ago, most people when they go to the gym, and when you do a weight machine, it's called a station. And so the typical way that you are taught is each station or each machine, you do 3 sets, and you do 3 sets of 10, or you do 3 sets of 8. And people do them very fast, they do them very jerky, they have a tendency to do it with too heavy of weight, and they create injury, and then they burn out, and they say, I'm not going to do that anymore. There is a concept developed by a gentleman in, I got the book here. This is another resource book. If any of you are interested in what I'm saying, his name is Adam Zickerman, The Power of 10, the slow motion workout. And what he says in this workout is that you do a station 1 set, and you want to do somewhere between 6 to 10 reps on that 1 set. And you want to find the amount of weights, and you have to play around with it for a while, but you want to find a set of weights where the point is to slowly taking 10 seconds to lift yourself and extend. And then without stopping, you come back the same amount of time. And if anybody's lifted weights and you're used to, try doing it so slow. And you do it nonstop. And when you get up to 10, 11, 12 reps, means you got to increase the weight to go back to 6. It works. I've lifted weights the traditional way for years, and I've done the slow motion way for a year and a half, and I have increased my weights with muscles more than the dozen years before that. And I can't tell enough people about it. And the thing of it is I used to, I've got a Capricorn rising. I can discipline myself as much as anybody, and I know you can smile with me, Miss Kay. Fellow Capricorn rising. And so I can discipline myself better than anybody. And I actually took a couple of years off from the gym because I burned myself out with weights. And I love doing this. I have rediscovered my love of going to the gym and the feeling that I get from it. And I've gained strength easier and better than I ever have. And it is such a simple concept. Don't have to spend the money on a weight trainer. Go buy the book, Power of 10 by Adam Zickerman, and you can teach yourself this, and you can use it again. And in doing this this way, it's been a little over a year and a half now, I've not had a single injury. And the biggest thing with weightlifting is the injuries that come from it. And Mars, the inflammation that comes, because when you lift weights, what you are doing is you are literally breaking down the muscle. And then you have the break from the lifting of the weights. You have a couple days off, or you go to do different parts of the body so that the muscle repairs itself.
Wondering about, my parents both take muscle relaxants, and like what is going on there?
That sounds like not enough calcium. If they've got cramping muscles?
It's not so much, well, I don't know if it's cramping, but stuff that's like more.
Well, you hear about this thing we call restless leg syndrome. I mean, I never saw Leroy laugh so much when he first heard about it. And I don't mean to make fun of it. If anybody, listening is working their way through that. But the muscle stuff is it's just a whole big picture of a lousy diet that doesn't supply us with adequate vitamins and minerals. Our Western societies are give me a pill for this and give me a pill for that, rather than trying to find a natural way to work its way through it. But muscle cramping can have a tendency to be a lack of minerals, mostly calcium, but they're also finding that calcium-magnesium ratio. They're also finding the lack of vitamin D. it could even be some of the phosphorus that's in there too. Could be silica. When we get into silica, into the homeopathic cell salts, silica is a very strong one necessary for every cell in the body.
I'm sure we'll get into it more, but I'm curious
Yes.
about things like blood pressure and stuff, because that's my
Yep,
family.
we'll get into all that with body
Leo,
systems.
Yeah, okay.
And I saved the body systems again as you look at this handout. After, we'll come back to body systems and we can combine some nutrition things in there after we work our way through the 12 archetypes, planets, and chakras in the next day or two. Okay, so understand this importance of just really being able to use it or lose it and save the muscles, work with the muscles. And then the other thing that they have also found that's quite common is those who lift weights have a lower incidence of breaking bones. That's one of the most important things that they will tell senior citizens who want to avoid breaking their bones. In addition to the diet and adequate minerals, namely, again, the calcium, magnesium, and the vitamin D, it's also the whole idea of strengthening the muscles, which because of their relationship to the bones via the ligaments, ligaments is what connects muscle to bone. Muscles, Mars. Ligaments, Mars. Bone, Saturn. Okay? But because when you lift your muscles and you build up the muscles and the ligaments, it has the strengthening effect with the bones. And I think what it also helps do is it just really helps put some of that whole assimilation issue in. I mean, if you look at the things that a cardio workout and plain exercise will do, is that there's not a body system that doesn't improve. And so that's going to include the overall assimilation process. Assimilation ruled by Jupiter. Okay? And so again, I have a whole article here on bones. They've got a thing on vitamin K and the green vitamin and how we build up bones. You can go into this and review some of this so you can look at this. They show you how you age in here. Again, that peak bone mass in the mid-20s, and then we start going down from there. Now, women, with women many, many times, potassium is another one that they've got in here. Sorry, I forgot that one. Another one is that, oh, you go to the end of the article and it lists them. Calcium, vitamin D, vitamin K, the protein, potassium, vitamin A. Ligaments are bone to bone. Tendons are muscle to bone. Ligaments, tendons, muscles, all three ruled by Mars. Okay, get that? Ligaments, bone to bone, tendons, muscle to bone. Did you hear that? Okay, and again, muscles, ligaments, and tendons are all Mars ruled.
I just have a question about that. It just seems like the nature of Mars isn't associated with like tendons and ligaments would bind things together. Mars separates things. So how is ligaments and tendons Martian?
Because they're not as hard as Saturn, I would say. And it could be that ligaments and tendons could be co-ruled by Mars and Saturn. If there's one thing that I have found in my planetary studies, nothing is singular. Everything is always in an interrelationship with everything else. And it could be a co-rulership with Mars and Saturn. But it's traditionally known that Mars rules the muscles, tendons, ligaments. Yeah. And again, I'm not the be-all, end-all. Everything is subject to change. Nothing's an absolute. Sounds like a true Mars in Libra, doesn't it? So let me see if I can remember back to menopause. That's what I wanted to say. I wanted to have a little touch on lifting weights. You know, it's known that once females go through menopause, there is a decrease, if not suspension of our hormonal ability to produce estrogen. Actually, my understandings of this from natural law, Venus, by the way, rules estrogen, all right? Venus rules estrogen, Mars rules progesterone in a woman. In a man, Venus rules estrogen. Men have estrogen, they have breasts. And Mars rules testosterone. So you'll find as we get into our body systems that Venus and Mars have co-rulerships of gonads. And so what I have found in my studies, having come through menopause, is that the estrogen production decreases, but we can still produce minute amounts of it. And once a woman goes through menopause, it's not necessary to produce as much estrogen or progesterone as it was pre-menopause. So when we lift weights, lifting weights is going to become especially important for women because it helps us decrease, if not avoid, all of the osteoporosis, the brittleness of the bones breaking down and increasing our susceptibility to breaking bones. All right? And I also, again, as we work with herbology some, when you can work with the herbal blends and herbs such as wild yam root, vitex, which is also known as chaste tree berries, those are known. Wild yam has progesterone. So does the vitex or chaste tree berries. And then the black cohosh root has the estrogen. And these are some natural herbs that women can supplement themselves with to work through the hormonal phases, the hot flashes, the night sweats. And it can take longer, but you can do it the natural route. I have. Those of you who have watched segment 1, remember how I announced my hot flashes 2 years ago? And so now they're just, actually now they're a new frequency on the AIM program, the energetic balancing work, if that happens, or if I choose to partake in alcohol. Otherwise, I've pretty much been able to, just with herbs and nutrition, balance out my hormones, which for me is an 8th house Pluto and a ton of planets in Scorpio and a Venus-Saturn conjunction in the 11th house, which is dehydration. I'm a classic one to have the brittle bones, which is why I've been interested in the exercise, in the supplementation with the herbs. And so it's not the fear factor that some of the traditional medicines want to teach us. Okay? Got that? So let's move into rest a little bit, and then we'll try and go back to nutrition, and we may put some of this nutrition into tomorrow and interplay it in amongst some of our other stuff too, instead of taking. I only wanted to spend a day on nutrition because we had so much other stuff to cover. When it comes to rest, people who have problems sleeping, I put exercise and rest together because nothing improves your sleep habits better than exercise. It's a simple thing. It's a very common thing. It's a very well-known thing, but it doesn't sell a lot of pharmaceuticals that way. What'd we say? What was the most common laxatives? Or the most common allopathic, or the highest selling allopathic medicine? I think second place has to be sleeping aids. I don't know, I'm just guessing that. But there's a whole market that's revolved around that. Now, the average rule for most people is to not exercise just before going to bed. The average rule for most people when they exercise builds energy, gives you energy. So for many people, it's exercising at least a couple hours before bed or exercising morning, sometimes during the day. But nothing improves the sleep aid better than that. I am not an expert with melatonin. I have not worked with melatonin any. The pineal gland in the body, which is one of the glands that's at the base of the brain, the pineal gland's right under the hypothalamus. We'll go through all this. The pineal gland is ruled by Neptune, and the pineal gland secretes melatonin, and that has a lot to do with our sleep, ability to sleep. One of the things that I will simply suggest to people is wearing iPads. Because again, in natural law, we did not live in metropolitan areas. We worked with the natural rhythms of light and dark. And we learned to go to sleep when it got dark. We learned to get up when it got light. And we went with the rhythms of the seasons. We had more sleep in the winter. We had less sleep in the summer. And so people who live in cities under major street lights, they even say those little, what do you call the clocks where they show the lights? They even say those can interrupt sleep patterns. So sometimes it can be just as simple as an iPad. And for the most part, when I'm not doing something like teaching an astrology class, I can keep my sleeping rhythms in check just with using a sleeping pad. So that's a very non-medicative thing that you might want to try. You look at sensitivities to Neptune in the chart, you can have sensitivities to your sleep patterns and your sleep interruptions. And you can relate to this with Neptune ruling dreams. Remember, Neptune rules the dream world? Okay? And just in case you guys haven't run across this in any of the materials, there's 3 types of dreams that Neptune rules. There are what we would know the most common dreams are junk dreams. We live in an information overload society, and most of us use our sleep time to release the excess material in our brain we no longer need. So these are the junk dreams. The second type of dream is past life dreams. Many times your past life dreams will feel like they are being viewed through a tunnel or some sense of far away. Many times they're in black and white, not an absolute, but they are. When you wake up from these types of dreams, they have a tendency to kind of shake you up, disturb you, because you really feel like you've been somewhere else. And what they've done is they've triggered deep memories in the unconsciousness. And as all souls evolve and expand in consciousness, by the time we are moving into second, third, more advanced spirituated states, it's about becoming conscious of all that we are unconscious of. It's eventually being able to hold the memory of this in every lifetime we've ever lived in consciousness. It's too overwhelming for our brain, for most of us, which is why we have, as a human species, developed an unconsciousness. And that unconsciousness ruled by Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, as you know from the traditional areas of EA. But Neptune rules the dream world. The third type of dream we have is what we call the superconscious dreams. And this is where we are either receiving very important information from entities outside human consciousness form, or where we travel in our dreams to other places. And so some amount of dreaming is a natural function. Depends upon, again, Neptune, 12th house, Pisces in your chart, how much you dream, how much you remember what you dream. As you, again, as your soul advances in consciousness, expands in consciousness, and again, we're able to balance everything better and better, we need less and less sleep, and remember the dream world more and more. And I'm a firm believer that you can get a lot of information in your sleep, whether you remember your dreams or not. And I'm a firm believer, as I said earlier, when you are wanting to be your own internal source of information, you ask the open-ended questions, physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. And you can ask those types of questions in the evenings, at night before you go to sleep, and you can ask for answers to be made known in your consciousness when you arise. Then you can repeat that process every night until you find your own information in your consciousness upon arising. And so we are a very sleep-deprived society, and we are also a westernized society in need of more sleep because of diet, because of lifestyle, because of all the stress we go through. Questions with what I'm saying?
I was also just wondering, like, in terms of dreams and your sleep world, aspects between the moon and Neptune seem like they would be really key for that.
Yes. As a matter of fact, good point. Our dreams have a tendency to go in lunar cycles, meaning if you follow the phasal relationships of the moon and Neptune. Oh, and as we get the revised evolutionaryastrology.net site up, Greg will have his dream journal. Greg Lanier's created a software program. Some of you may have had it from the old site, in which you can literally journal your dreams in this little software program of Greg's. And so then you can go back and do search functions. What kind of dreams do you have when the, moon is first quarter phase, or the moon is whatever phase? So very important thing. Yes, you can find that the moon can be interrelated to that.
You mean the phases, so the phase, like sun, moon phase, but then you said also with Neptune.
I think, do you remember Leroy? Did anybody download it? I've never worked with the Dream Journal.
I did.
And is it sun moon phase, or is it moon Neptune?
I don't remember seeing sun on it, so it must be moon Neptune.
Anybody else remember?
Maybe Pam knows.
Well, I thought it was quarters.
It's quarters.
Yeah.
Then
There
it
was
would
no
be-
sun involved in
If
it.
it's quarters, if it's first quarter, if it's the 8 phases, if it's the 8 phases, then it's sun moon.
Okay, yeah, it's definitely phases and quarters.
Then it's the sun moon in the Dream Journal. We'll have that on the EA.net site to just download.
Okay. Yeah, and I think we may have talked about this, but I experienced sleep paralysis. And this is something that quite a few people actually experience, at least a few times in their life, but I experience it regularly. And
what
I was-
happens in sleep paralysis?
It's waking up, seeming like you're waking up, but part of you is awake and part of you is still sleeping. You're not able to move your body, so you're able to kind of wake, and part of you has woken, but part of you hasn't. So, but what makes this really powerful is that it's often a very frightening experience,
Oh, yeah.
and has been. A lot of times there's a feeling like there's a presence involved in this experience that is threatening. And I've read about this, and this is cross-cultural, it's cross-historical. So it's not just a localized thing. And so I'm just thinking about that and feeling like that is something that, especially if it's happening on a repeated basis, would be archetypal. And I'm just, I would love to explore that a little bit. And I could look at my chart and call out a couple things that would instantly pull that up for me. But it's a powerful thing, and especially if there's somebody hasn't experienced it a lot, and then they do, I would imagine there's a transit that's very obviously
Right.
pointing to that. And
Right.
I'm personally, interested in this also because the description of it is similar to some people's descriptions of alien abduction experiences.
Right.
The sense of presence, of like not being able to move, of very like categorically very similar. And so, you know, and then again, Moon Neptune, that would make kind of sense if there's some connections going on there. I have a square, so, you know, but I also have Chiron and Mercury in my 12th.
That
So-
yeah. See, as I'm listening, as I'm intuiting with it, it seems classic Neptune. Okay, Pisces 12th house, but that's not to say that it couldn't involve, say, Venus Taurus in the second and entrapment. Okay, could also be Saturn Capricorn in the 10th. You know, which is the paralysis issue. To me, it kind of sounds like it could be possibly those, not saying that, to me it's classic Neptune. And then the question is Moon, Venus, Saturn would be the other ones that I would start to question would come into that. It could also be something where it could be classic Neptune, and again, Neptune's purpose is to transcend, is to dissolve boundaries. And people who have a lot of Neptune, Pisces, or 12th house in their chart, one of their lessons in life can sometimes be learning to have healthy boundaries. And if you don't have healthy boundaries, then having that susceptibility for other entities to come through. And so definitely. The other thing that could even come into that is Pluto. You know, Pluto, Venus, Scorpio, Taurus is that whole master-slave thing. It's that whole, you know, the battle with the dual desires, with the separating forces trying to undermine. So even Pluto can start to come into that. But Neptune seems to be the common denominator into that, and so then possibly stressful Neptune. I've not heard of that before, so that I made a note of it to yeah, just kind of follow through and see what I come across in studies. Anybody else have any awareness of, hear about that before?
I've had experiences where I'm very scared in my dream, but I cannot scream. So I was wondering if that would be the same kind of thing.
Did you feel like you were awake?
No, I knew I wasn't awake, but I felt in danger.
Yeah. So yeah, that's the typical feeling. And when I've talked to other people about it, it is a feeling of being threatened, and you can't speak, you can't even make sound, and yet like I can sense like there's a presence, but that knows that that's not really there, but the feeling of another entity is very strong a lot of the time, and it's never a kind or beneficial force. And my feeling, as I've thought about it over the years, is that you're on the astral plane, and there's astral entities, there's ghosts, there's other beings that have not maybe left, or they're in the bardo, and they're looking for some kind of energy to attach to. So what I do now is send, you know, love and healing, but it doesn't feel like it's emerging from me. It feels outside of me, and that's what's
Trying to get you.
so interesting about it.
What pops into my head is something that we know through primary work with evolutionary astrology that I did want to mention this week, so you popped it in, and that is the self-hypnosis tapes that Jeffrey would talk about to reprogram the unconsciousness. I would say that those types of tapes would be good to make up the self-healing affirmations of strength and healthy boundaries, and to work with that area. You're familiar with that, where you make the list of the negatives and the list of the positives, and then the positives you want to make present tense, possibly I am statements, but you want to make the healing statements present tense, not future tense. And you record them on some type of cassette tape, or nowadays you can do a CD, and you play that every night when you go to sleep. And the rule of thumb is that you want to use earbuds, and you only put it in the right ear, the earbud only in the right ear, right to receive. You want to do this every night, And the rule is 4 to 6 months until you start to see change in your conscious world. Now, you don't only have to do this with entities. You can do this with wanting to be more prosperous, wanting to release weight, whatever it is you perceive that you need to heal in your life. And we're talking about Jeffrey's self-hypnosis tapes. And what Jeffrey would say is that if you skip a night or two, then you need to start over on the 4 to 6 month count. I've known people who've done these tapes for 2 years and finally create change in their relationships. Kim?
So is there a belief that if it's your own voice, it's more powerful than buying like over-the-counter
Yes.
hypnosis tapes?
Yes. Yes, there is that belief. And the other thing that I will tell people is you can change the tape. Let's just say you do the tape and you realize you forgot something, or you've been doing this for 3 months and you got areas that are coming along, but you got other areas that are arising into consciousness. Change the tape. But I have found that to be, because we do all these affirmations, we all do all these visualizations, we do all this stuff to change on a conscious level, but we don't realize just how strong the unconsciousness is. And so it's reprogramming on an unconscious level. And so that's what I would say would be a classic to help in the whole area that you're just describing. That would seem to be a natural way to self-heal that. Other questions or comments in regards to the rest?
I was just curious when you were talking about bones being ruled by Saturn. Does that incorporate joints also? Are joints Saturn?
Yes, joints are Saturn too.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll go over all that stuff specifically as time when we get into 12 archetypes. Before we start, I know this, I'll read it for the tape. Would you, honey, would you turn around and show everybody your back?
Oh, sure, this is a health issue.
The Montana paramedics. Feed the bear, squat with your spurs on, let your kids ride the elk, picnic in poison ivy, drive fast and pass on the curves. That's one of my favorite t-shirts. Yeah. Montana paramedics, we're here to help. We always need humor by the time we get to the afternoon, don't we? Okay, so let's go back to this whole idea of nutrition that I was touching upon, some of my important, just my personal areas that are important for me. And we'll speak to some more of those, and I remembered another area that was important. We had a couple of comments over the break. You will notice in your manual, when you go to the first section, the first 2 pages, we have the Omni Heart Pyramid, and we have the Dash Pyramid. I've got to remember what Dash is. Dash is, anybody remember that one? It's a very common way, it's turned up. Remember the news about the DASH diet being able to naturally lower cholesterol and improve blood pressure, which helps heart disease, and heart disease is known as the number 1 disease killer in the United States. It's the DASH diet that really broke through nutritionally with people to get even your, let's say, allopathic world to recognize that diet does make a difference with health. And so the DASH diet was the Omni Heart scheme, pyramid scheme that you see. As the DASH diet gained its credibility, they took the research further. And the Omni Heart played with the DASH diet and said, what if we added a little higher carb or a higher protein or a higher unsaturated fat? And so you will see in your nice pretty little color breakout that they've broken it down into all the variables that you need to change if you want to modify the DASH diet. And of course the DASH diet, as you can see, the bottom of the pyramid is the fruits and vegetables, 8 to 10 per day. The grains, 7 to 8. You see the low-fat dairy, if you choose that, 2 to 3 per day servings. Remember what we said The difference was in the different servings. The meat and the lean meat, seafood, poultry, if you choose to be meat, 0 to 2 a day. Beans, nuts, seeds, 1 per day. Salads, oils, dressings, 2 to 3 per day. And sweets, no more than 5 per week. And then it goes into all those details. And so between these two pyramids, these are some easy guidelines for most people who don't want to get a PhD in nutrition. You know, nutrition is when we start going in that direction, it can get to be a very complicated subject. And as we spoke this morning, you know, each of us are going to have different genetics. Each of us are going to have different lifestyle choices. Each of us are going to have different belief system choices, being vegetarian or meat eating. This segment is not here to debate the merits of either side of that spectrum, yes or no, or some of those details. It's for each of you to decide. I tried to put together what I feel is some of the most basic nutrition in that area. And so again, these two pyramid schemes, the Omni Heart scheme or pyramid and the Dash pyramid, these can be some basic guidelines that you can use when you're working with nutrition and wanting to improve it. The following page, fruits and vegetables and pesticides. That's always a big area as well, organic or not organic. And we were talking a little bit at lunch, even today for a lot of us when we are trying to go organic, even our organic foods today do not have the nutrients by way of vitamins and minerals that they had in our diets 100 years ago or even 50 years ago. The soil has been depleted so much. You've got to do organics that have had organic soil and rotation of crops and a real effort to create live soil for many, many years. You've got to have organic soil where there's been crops like alfalfa that have deep root systems that dig down into the soil to get out the trace minerals, to bring them up to the surface, to allow that type of plant to die on the soil, to really neutralize the soil. So even our organics is not as healthy as they used to be. But even more important to that, pesticide or no pesticide. In the last, 60, 70 years, we've added more chemicals to our diet than ever before, and that they accumulate in the tissues of the body as toxins. And so the reason I included what's in your fruits and vegetables is, again, here CSPI has shown us the dirty dozen. In other words, the dirty dozen fruits and vegetables on top, if you're non-organic and you avoid those, you will eliminate 90% of the pesticides from your diet. And I have a lot of favorites in that dirty dozen. So therefore, you can tell which fruits and vegetables are more important to eat organically because of the pesticide residues. And then the consistently clean, which is the dozen on the bottom. Those are the ones that have very, very little pesticides in their growth, so you can go non-organic with those. So just to read them for sake of our tape, the dirty dozen: peaches, apples, sweet bell peppers, celery, nectarines, strawberries, cherries, pears, imported grapes, spinach, lettuce, and potatoes. Those are always important to do organic. Consistently clean, when we can go non-organic: papaya, broccoli, cabbage, bananas, kiwi, sweet peas, asparagus, mango, pineapples, sweet corn, avocado, and onions. And then, of course, there's a whole listing of them in between, and they show you how, on their average testing, how much, what percentage of these fruits and vegetables had their pesticides in them. So I thought that was a nice little reference sheet for people who are very chemically sensitive and trying to eliminate these types of things from their diet. And I don't know of any specific planetary archetype that rules pesticides. These are all multisyllable inorganic chemicals that shouldn't be a part of the diet to begin with that.
Did you talk this morning about composting at all?
No, and actually I have that on my little list here somewhere, but I haven't talked about composting. Have you done it? Talk. Go for it. I've not composted, although I believe in it.
I'm not an expert at it, but we just started with getting some organic soil, and then any produce that we bought that was organic, we put into the compost pile until we created soil that was rich enough to put our own plants into. And now that's just the consistent, anything that I produce that's left over, it just goes into a little bucket next to the recycling bucket, and when it's full, we take it out. And the only thing that I don't put in it is meat and dairy products. I'll put pasta in there even if it's because I buy organic pasta. I put almost everything. I put fruits, vegetables, and any grain product that I know that I've bought that's organic, I'll put it in there and consistently, stir the soil, and then that soil just goes directly onto the garden plants, and it's fantastic.
And what's the rule on eggs? You add
Shut-
eggshells?
Shells. We put the
Eggshells?
shells in, but not the eggs themselves.
Right, right. And the eggshells add mineralization. Yep.
Yep. And also, if you drink loose leaf green or black tea, rather than not the tea in the little packets, but if you buy, raw,
The loose leaf.
imported, usually from China, if it's
Yep.
good quality, the leftover water that's left with the leaves, we put that in there as well, and it's full of antioxidants and things like that. So
Well, that's a good one. The other thing that I've heard is the more that you turn the compost pile, the faster you make compost. And will you hand it to Kim? Have you done it, Kim?
Well, I haven't done it, but my husband does it. And what we have is a worm bin. So we went out and got worms from OMSI. They have a science department over there in Portland, and he decided that he was going to do that. So the worms will naturally turn the compost for you.
Ah.
So you don't have to do it. And then he separates that, and he's actually given it to like 3 other people who have started their own worm bins out of it. So.
Oh, all right. Thank you. Anybody else who's composted?
I don't have anything to say about it. So
Okay.
should-
No, I don't have any expertise on composting, but that is one of the best ways to really get your organics back, nutrients back in the soil and going. Yeah. Good.
Could you talk about also antibacterial stuff?
Oh, virus, bacteria.
Or, even in our products, like antibacterial soaps and stuff like that. Because I always don't use them.
It's
'cause
a
I think-
joke.
Yeah, because it gets rid of good bacteria, right?
All these antibacterial soaps that are out there, it just helps make all the bacteria that's become drug resistant even more drug resistant. What I've read in the studies is that it doesn't do anything. And quite frankly, there's been some articles coming out about this recently, and I agree with it. When it comes to viruses and bacteria, the more that young toddlers and young children play in the dirt, the healthier their immune systems, because they build up their own natural immunities to the viruses and bacteria that are in there. So, allergies and asthma allergies are Neptune. Asthma, I think, is going to relate to Uranus and Neptune. And these are just all signs of a very allergic system in the body, or a weakened immune system in the body. And allergies related to Neptune are coming from Neptune ruling the immune system. Allergies are ruled by Neptune. And to me, asthma is ruled by Uranus and Neptune. Allergies are usually food-based, but they can also just be in the environment, and that's when, like a pine allergy might be related to Uranus, because Uranus rules the breath in the air and the lungs. And so asthma is, we can't take in breath, and they've been starting to show that asthma is coming from weakened immune systems, and Neptune always rules the immune system. And Mercury can have a co-rulership, a secondary rulership of the immune system. We'll see that when we go through 6th, 12th Virgo Pisces. Okay? And so let me see if I can remember any questions on this whole fruits and vegetables? Go ahead, Marie.
I read that they're going to start irradiating all of our vegetables because of this Ebola thing and spinach and that kind of thing. And what are we supposed to do then?
It's called eating locally. It's basically supporting your farmers markets and supporting your local produce growers or growing your own, and getting into community gardens and growing your own. I mean, it's not a fashionable thing to do because we'd rather, go to the movies than raise crops. And I'm a farm girl. I was the oldest of 3 girls raised on a farm, so I know the labor involved in raising crops. That's why I grow flowers and go to the farmer's market. But it is about I'm not remembering the acronyms or the cliches for it. Shoot. There's a new one out, growing it locally, acting globally, something like that. I've seen them, but I'm not doing it. But it really is growing back to, again, what we read until 150 years ago, we were all agriculturalists. So in the last 150 years, which is a speck of time, we've all stopped growing our own food. And so it doesn't mean we all have to go back to growing our own food. You live in metropolitan areas, even a little small community like we have in Rapid City has a very healthy farmers market that you can go down and buy their locally growing produce. The more locally grown products you can buy, the better it is for the environment because you don't have all of the pollution from the shipping costs. And the less that it is shipped, the healthier it's going to be when you eat it. It's picked ripe. It's not picked half green. And your local farmers markets many times are also organic. So I think that we're going to find that, nutrition and locally grown food are going to be bigger and bigger and bigger items as we see sicker and sicker kids and societies. It's going to create its backlash, but it's also then going to have all of your pharmaceuticals, your military-industrial complex, and all of your, mass-produced foods. They don't want us to catch on and recognize what we're doing to ourselves. Because if you look at the round circle of sickness between all of the fast food producers and the pharmaceuticals, if anybody would be in bed together, it'd be those two. One was food combining, and another was acid-alkaline imbalance, and we've got a couple of others. Now, the whole issue of food combining, it's a pretty interesting concept all on its own, and it naturally makes sense. And so, historically, what happened is when we lived in more natural law, we were hunters and gatherers for a long period of time. And we'd get the meats when we could get the meats, but we did a lot of nuts and seeds and berries. And we had a tendency to pretty much eat mono meals, as I like to call them. We would eat one food item at a time, and our digestive system would work with that single food item. When you start combining different food types between proteins, carbs, and fats, then you are calling for different digestive enzymes to be working. And what basically happens is you get a very confused stomach. And we will know that as gas, as bloating, as sluggishness and tiredness. We will know it as incompletely digesting our food, so it ends up as plaque in those intestines again. It ends up with all of the skin eruptions. So that whole, we talked a little bit about digestive enzymes yesterday, so now we're going to come back to this this morning. Gosh. So we're going to come back to that subject. The digestive process starts in the mouth. And so it's extremely important that we chew foods. Again, in our more natural states, when we were hunters and gatherers, we didn't necessarily scarf down the food. We didn't know when the next meal was going to come, so we could put a lot more energy into eating that food. That was the preciousness. That was the precious resources. Finding the food and taking the time to really digest it and eat it. And again, we didn't have all this other stuff thrown in to confuse things, so we digested it better, we assimilated it better. Vera Luz just showed me a great little chart. I've never seen it like this as a one page, so I'll definitely get a copy. We'll definitely get this and email this to you, a food combining chart. I'll just read some of the things for you right now. Eat proteins and carbohydrates at separate meals. How many of us do that? Eat proteins and carbohydrates at separate meals. Eat only one concentrated protein at each meal. Treat juices, fruits or vegetables as whole foods. Remember I talked about that this morning? Eat the food instead of the juice. Drink, take milk alone or not at all. And I sometimes think that might be all dairy products, not just milk.
When you're looking at milk versus cheese, cheese is actually the better option. When you look at the protein within milk, it's a more complex protein than any meat that we digest. And if you think about it logically, we're feeding off of an animal who creates that milk for their offspring, and their offspring have 4 stomachs. We have 1. So we're
one.
digesting with 1 stomach what another animal digests with 4. So by the time you get cheese, it's essentially milk digested once. So you don't have to work as hard to digest cheese as you do milk from a cow.
That makes sense. Why I no longer drink milk, but I can do cheese. Okay, good one. I'm not quite seeing the word here. Desserts. Did you get that one? D-E-S-E-R-T, desserts. In other words, no desserts. Sorry, guys, no sugars. None of you are going to eat sugar anymore, me included, right?
Right.
Cold foods, Jesse and I were talking about this at lunch. Cold foods, including liquids, inhibit digestion. One of the things we didn't touch upon very much was water, and I'm a big believer in water. I've recently read some interesting things in where you need a little bit of water with your meal to help with the digestive process, but you need most of your water in between meals. And we don't need water as much as we think we do, except because we have such processed food diets, we need more water, just like we need more sleep. Make sense? Understand? Okay. And I was someone who, I don't know why, I guess it's because I don't do extremes of cold very well, even though I live in the northern plains. I got in the habit of just drinking all of my water room temperature, and have been that way for years and years and years. And so I'm sure that, and so this combining chart says the same thing with cold foods, not just liquids. Just pick it up, honey.
The reason being within the stomach, when you make it cold, if you, like I was saying at lunch, if you put oil in a warm glass of water and in a cold glass of water, it balls up in a cold and it disperses in a warm. If you're looking at it from your stomach's perspective, if your stomach is cold, when the oil hits your stomach, it's balling up and it's becoming solidified, so the body's not processing it and it just sits in your body as fat rather than being broken up by the heat of your stomach and processed and then put down into your colon.
Yeah, in Asia, they only serve hot. In Asia, they only serve with meals warm water. Yeah, they don't serve cold at all. And it isn't because it's cold in Hong Kong where it's not cold, but it's always warm water with meals.
Good one.
And they know their food.
There we go. Okay, so now according to this chart, combining fats and oils like avocado, the nut oils, the olive oils, the creams, the lards, all of that stuff is poor to mix it with proteins, such as cheese, milk, nuts, meat, fowl, fish, eggs. So you can see what that does to many scrambled eggs with dairy. And it also says it's a poor combination to do carbohydrates. Oh, no, excuse me, poor combination to do carbohydrates such as beans with proteins, such as the meat proteins, the milk, the nuts, the seeds. And so the carbohydrates like beans and cereals and grains, lentils, potatoes, they are excellent with non-starchy vegetables, high water content foods, and high water content foods are, well, you can just think of the foods that have a lot of water. Asparagus, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, cucumber, dandelion, they're naming green beans, just trying to pick some out. Spinach, sprouts, squash, sweet peppers, those are good to mix. Non-starchy vegetables, high water content vegetables. You can mix those not only with the carbohydrates that we just listed, the beans, etc., but you can also mix those with the meats. And that's what I've always heard. If you're going to eat your animal protein, then have it with a salad. But you need to then work with what type of dressing you're going to have, because it says the oils go good with the non-starchy vegetables having a salad, but it doesn't necessarily go good with the meat. What I recognized with, again, this is why I spoke so highly of digestive enzymes this morning, because in our modern diet we put so many combos together that are not good for us. I have just really found that having, using digestive enzymes helps me with these food combinations that are not the healthiest. I also have a tendency, if someone brings me a plate and it's got multiple items on it, I eat one food and then I eat the next and then I eat the next. I don't eat a bite of this and a bite of that and a bite of this. I don't mix it up. I have a tendency to just eat this item and then that item, so they're running through my stomach one at a time. I always eat, if there's any fruits, I always eat my fruits first before anything else, and then eat whatever else comes next, and many times the vegetables last. Or another one that I will do is I'll eat the foods that digest the easiest first to get them through my system, and eat the foods that are combined the most last, so that my body can deal with those that are going to take longer to digest because of the combining, eating those later. Now, when it comes to fruits, you never should mix fruits with other things. And that's why when people want to serve fruit as a dessert at the end of a meal, I've years ago learned not to participate in that. If I'm going to do my fruits, it's right away or they're alone. And even with fruits, the rule of thumb is that you don't mix the acid fruits with the sweet fruits. And melons are always done alone. You eat the melons such as cantaloupe, honeydew, papaya, muskmelon, watermelon. You do all of those alone. And okay, so here's its rules for fruits. Only eat fruit alone as a fruit meal. Fruits should not be eaten between meals while other food is digesting in the stomach. Do not eat sweet fruits and acid fruits together. I mentioned that one. Melons are best eaten alone, but can be mixed with acid and subacid fruits. So acid fruits are all your, like your berries and lemons, limes, oranges, grapefruits, those things. Pomegranate is considered an acid fruit. A sour apple is an acid fruit. Pineapple is an acid fruit. So you can mix those with the melons. Subacid fruits are the apples, blueberries, cherries, kiwi, mango, papaya, peach, pear, plum. You can mix those with the melons. Sweet fruits, these are the ones that it's very important to eat all by themselves. Bananas, dates, currants, figs, dried fruit, grapes, papaya, persimmon, prunes, raisins. So you can just remember sweet fruits by themselves. I have a tendency to do that. If somebody hands me a fruit bowl, I have a tendency to eat all the fruits but the bananas. And I'll just leave the bananas because of the digestive issues with that. All right, does that make sense? You can, and then there's one more category, non-starchy vegetables, such as carrots, corn, peas, cauliflower, artichokes, beets. You can mix those with your proteins. You can mix those with your carbs. So just to review a little bit, the only thing that really works good with fats and oils are your non-starchy vegetables that have lots of water and the carbs, such as beans, cereals, grains, lentils. Questions? Make sense with that?
Is that on a website?
It's a nice little one-page handout, and we'll either figure out how to give you a handout of this week, or we'll email you a copy. Now, another area that has been a good one for me that I've just, this has been a kind of a hot button with nutrition, is the whole acid alkaline concept. You know, and it's become a buzzword that all of your physical manifestations of imbalances grow and expand in an acid environment. And when you alkalize the environment, you heal. And there are alkalizing waters. There are all kinds of things to help alkalize the body. For me, the best thing to alkalize the body is raw foods. Raw fruits and vegetables. I've tried to do some of those alkalizing waters, and I've not noticed the difference with those. But if I feel my system being a little acidic and I start eating some raw fruits and vegetables, I notice that it neutralizes it down. Now, obviously, to get to the point of the manifestation of major illnesses, that acidic environment has to have been there for a long period of time to create an ability for that to manifest. I try to look up and research acid alkaline with astrology. I did not run across anything in reading any of Jeffrey's works, but when I kind of thought about it for myself, that acid alkaline, I started wondering if it wasn't Venus and Mars ruled. Venus rules white blood cells. Mars rules red blood cells. And so a lot of your acid alkalinity issues will come through the blood. And so I suspect that acid alkaline issues might fall in the chart through Venus and Mars. It's also possible it could be Saturn, because as you remember, when we get enough calcium, calcium has an alkaline effect in the body. And so it's possible it could be a Saturn, even a Saturn-Jupiter thing. Jupiter is excess. We have excess of food combining. It almost always creates acidity. So it could be the Jupiter-Saturn thing as well. I'm kind of playing around with that one, with those two areas. But that's kind of where what I've come up with so far in my own studies and working with this. And so there's the whole thing of alkalizing food and acidic food. And so just briefly, I'm going to read the categories. Alkalizing foods: vegetables, fruits, many spices and seasonings, oriental vegetables. Alkalizing proteins are eggs, cottage cheese, chicken breast, yogurt, almonds. Says tofu, I'll speak, fermented tofu, fermented tempeh, pumpkin seeds, squash seeds, sunflower seeds, your nuts. I have to be careful. Sometimes when I do nuts, I'll notice they're a little acidic for me. They have an acidic response with me. And then as acidifying foods, fats and oils. There's some nuts that are acidifying. This is why I explained it. Cashews, Brazil nuts, peanuts, pecans, tahini, walnuts. Alcohol, almost all your animal proteins are acidifying. Cranberries is the only acidifying fruit. Many of your grains are acidifying. Corn, oat, rice, wheat, even hemp seed flour. Your cheeses are acidifying. Milk and butter is acidifying. So just touching on a few of those. This is a nice other little graph thing that we'll figure out a way to get all of you a copy for, so you don't have to worry with that so much. But that whole acid-alkaline balance, I think that we'll see more and more information start to come out on that. And for people, as people start to figure that one out. And whenever your feeling is real acidic, sometimes it is just as simple as really getting a good amount of water in between the meals, because that will help alkalize the body. I did want to share one of the things that I also remembered. This is going to play off a little, or vary off acid alkaline. We can discuss it more, but I don't want to forget this. I have went through in my 25, 30 years of searching, I went through my time periods of vegetarianism. And one time I did soy. It was about 10 years ago when I still would work with my menses. And I went on soy for about a year and a half. I decided to go vegetarian and give up meat. And so I started doing a lot of soy products. It really threw off my hormone cycles after I had done so much work to balancing them. Remember we talked this morning about those fertility cycles and balancing the natural and cosmic fertility cycles. I had done so much with that. And then I decided to go vegetarian, and that soy just really whacked me. And not only that, I got a cyst on my right breast the size of an egg. And it was just a liquid fill. Actually, I had two. There was one the size of a marble. And it was a liquid-filled cyst that then they just stuck a needle in and drained. It was kind of my wake-up call that, no, I'm not digesting soy very well. And then I had a friend at the time, actually the friend who was the microscopist using the live blood cell analysis under a microscope. He was the one that then really started educating me on soy. And so what I pretty much recognized is a lot of our soy needs to be fermented, which is what miso and tempeh are. And so that's taking soy and working with enzymes and bacteria to pre-digest the soy so that it is a much easier digestible form for us. And I think a lot of these soy protein powders and protein bars and all that stuff, that's what I was doing. I don't think we can digest that stuff. So I learned that the hard way. And it took me years to straighten out my hormones after I went through that one. So I rarely, it upset me so much, I rarely do soy anymore. Very, very rarely do I participate in any soy products. So I just remember that little detail. Again, we're going to cover supplements in more detail when we get into the rulerships of vitamins and minerals via the plants or planet and their archetypes. Anybody have any other questions on acid alkaline? Pretty clear with people? Well, go ahead.
Are you saying that we should eat mostly alkaline and a little acid, or
Yes.
avoid acid altogether?
Yes, as much as you can, yeah. You want to be very careful with acidifying foods. Yeah. And almost a lot of our westernized diet is acidic. But look at all the disease we have running around. Cancer used to be far and few in between, and now everybody knows somebody with cancer or a major disease. And again, it's not an old person's disease anymore. It's any age group. Now there's some other factors in that, and I'll share some of that later, but this is the diet part of it.